This video is going to be shorter than usual, but at the same time, a bit longer, since I'm here to talk about a topic I discuss often. A while ago, I made a video speaking poorly of this character, not in a bad way, because sadly, he's a character I liked from the very first time I saw him in the Genshin Impact manga. The guy was farming a lot of aura, at least that was the vibe in that video, titled The Worst Electro in Genshin Impact, which got quite a few views in the Spanish-speaking community. So here we are again to talk about poor Cyno. First off, I'm gonna drop a phrase that contextualizes everything we'll be talking about in this video. Hoyoverse has treated Cyno pretty badly despite him being a widely loved character. With that out of the way, we can make a brief timeline of this character's history, explaining how he took a massive nosedive and still rose from the ashes like a phoenix, starting with what were Cyno's problems when he arrived in the game? Upon release, Cyno already had his best possible team available. Compared to other characters, he didn't have to wait at all to reach his maximum potential, keeping the context of that time in mind. I'm referring to his archetype Nahida, Baiju, or another Dendro, or Hydro, and Yelan/Shinkyu. Now that we've explained the situation, let's clearly state what his issues were, and I'm warning you right now, beyond the math and what the calcs tell you, most of the problems I'm about to mention are obstacles that happen in actual gameplay. Inability to swap out during his burst. Leaving aside that he's a character who demands way too much field time and eats up the uptime of the other characters, his biggest issue is Nahida's elemental skill. Because beyond it just being Cyno's fault, Nahida is also to blame for not being able to reapply her mark to new waves, meaning back then, he lost a highly significant amount of damage whenever he killed enemies. Sure, in boss fights or against enemies tanky enough to survive, the problem wasn't noticeable. Back then, swapping to Nahida meant a colossal DPS loss if you wanted to fix the multi-wave issue. A long time later, Llama arrived, who generally buries Nahida in many aspects, but honestly, when she came out, nobody even remembered Cyno. It's just worth noting that other selfish carries like Xiao didn't suffer from this, simply because of the existence of a character that does reapply their buffs and debuffs regardless of the situation. Slow ceiling. A slow damage ceiling basically means your rotation starts much later, as the setup skills take long enough to make your rotation feel clunky.
For example, an Alhaitham rotation takes less time than an Arlecchino rotation.
This posed a huge disadvantage against enemies with animations where you need a fast ceiling, like the Heralds, or that damn perpetual mechanical array. It also feeds right into the multi-wave problem. Investment limits. The investment for this character was always awful, partly because of his own constellations and the category of his team, which would be Hyperbloom, since that reaction always had pretty strict investment caps. The cost. I think it's obvious to clarify that the cost of his teams was nowhere near cheap for how little they offered you back in the day. There was very direct competition for Cyno, which was putting Nahida on field with Xingqiu, Kuki, and a random flex unit. All the aforementioned problems with the character magically disappear just by using those three guys, except Cyno's team required pulling for Cyno himself, which already costs a 5-star pity, Nahida, or currently Llama, Baiju, and Furina, Yelan, or if you were broke, Shinkyu. All of this just to reach a DPS that, at the time, could be considered decent. Of course, keep in mind those were different times. Right now, the strongest teams are super inflated because they operate on a totally different standard. Currently, Cyno's old teams are ridiculously bad for the amount of investment they demand compared to others, not to mention the practical issues he has in combat.
Now that we've set the context for Cyno's situation, you guys have no idea how happy I was to find out this character was getting buffed for the new version, where they are adding the new Stellar Superconduct reaction. I've always been of the mindset that people play Genshin for the characters. Everyone has their own fandom, even the ones you'd think don't, like Xinyan. Without a doubt, she is someone's favorite character out there. So it's been beneficial for Genshin for a while now to give direct buffs to characters instead of just needing to release new ones to survive. So obviously, I genuinely thought this was the rebirth of Cyno, the absolute beast. That is, until I saw that the buffs are absolute trash. Not because of how strong they make the characters, but because of their activation requirements. You see, the buffs are scattered across various parts of the kits, except almost all of them require triggering a stellar superconduct reaction. And what is the one and only way to trigger a stellar superconduct reaction? Well, by having Sandrone. Good grief. The Hex and Zircle stuff doesn't seem bad to me, because you only need 2 characters from that category and you automatically unlock full potential. But being forced to pull a character just to take advantage of a buff that was sold as an independent upgrade? Garbage. Anyway, it might sound like I complain a lot, but up to this point, it's tolerable. Fine, I'll pull Sandrone. Regardless, I am 100% sure that in a few versions, they'll release a Columbina who enables stellar reactions on demand. Well, let's look at Cyno's individual buff. The only relevant thing about his buffs is that an extra hit was added to one of Cyno's talents. And it wasn't just any regular hit, it was a direct, hard-hitting stellar strike that multiplied by 600% and by the reaction multiplier. The results of these calculations made Cyno's stellar hits incredibly strong. Seriously, absurdly strong, to the point where he was ending up better off than Sandrone's damage, or almost the same. I'm guessing it crosses your mind that, well, then it was a good idea to nerf him because he was going to massively overshadow Sandrone. Very true, my friend. I think anyone could deduce that. The only problem is that they didn't just nerf him, they killed him in such an absurd way that it's sad and pitiful, stripping away half of his individual damage. No, it wasn't a normal nerf. Let's explain a bit about how the nerf happened. In his passive talent, the multiplier located at the very end was multiplied by EM and the reaction multiplier, to then be added to the base damage as flat additive damage. I don't know if that's clear enough, but what is known as base damage is the combination of ATK, talent scaling, and in the case of stellar and lunar damage, the reaction damage. This talent literally functioned as exactly that. The talent, which would be the 600%, the base multiplier, which is roughly 1.9 from the stellar reaction, and the EM, which acted as the ATK in this scenario. I'm only explaining it this way so you understand how powerful he was, theoretically speaking. So anyway, giving an example, let's calculate a stellar hit without a team, since I just want to show the theory and not a full team's DPS. I will put these stats as an example so we can start calculating. Okay, now I'll show the formula. ATK times passive talent times the reaction multiplier, which we will take as 1.9, and we will multiply the rest of the formula like EM, base reaction multiplier, and reaction bonus. Okay, here comes the kicker. To the result of the previous calculation, we will add the following. 600% times Cyno's EM, which I'll keep low, 300 for example, and the reaction multiplier. After that, we'd multiply it by what's left of the formula. We'd get this as the result. That's more or less what a stellar hit from Cyno looked like in his first version. I mean, V1. Now let's get to the funny part. The only thing that happens in Cyno's V2 changes is shifting the position of the increase within the formula, alongside heavily nerfing the reaction multiplier. Meaning that right at the start, we remove the 1.9 duplicate, and the 600% along with the 300 EM gets shifted all the way to after multiplying the reaction bonuses, the EM, the talents, the ATK, etc. Leaving it on this side, if we calculate with the exact same stats, the result is this. I think the difference is massive, but don't worry, there's even more. While the character used to increase his damage a ton with EM, since it converted into part of the base damage, leaving it as a flat additive means the difference when you have low EM is noticeable, but with high EM, it is exponentially worse. And that brings us to the present day. Jesus gave our beloved Cyno another chance to pick himself up off the ground and come back more alive than ever. Let's explain his V4 changes, which are as brutally simple as increasing the MV of the passive from 80% ATK to 200%. That's it. Yeah, there really isn't much explanation needed since it isn't very complex either. But simply raising that stellar hit MV makes Cyno recover a good chunk of the damage he lost in V2. I want to make it clear that obviously, Cyno isn't stronger than in V1, and he still suffers from the aforementioned problem where EM loses value. But hey, it's better than nothing. The current Cyno handles a decent DPS. He's not sitting above others like Rio and Sandrone, but it's definitely a victory worth celebrating. By the way, the rotations used in Cyno's stellar superconduct calculations are extremely short. We are used to long rotations, but the one here is a mere 8 seconds. This is because there's a new passive talent on Cyno that causes casting the character's elemental skill to grant you his burst state without actually activating the burst for 6 seconds. Funny, isn't it? And the most important detail is that Cyno's teams are technically only 3 characters, and it's been like that across all his versions. As you might notice, Sandrone doesn't take the field even once. She is strictly there to trigger stellar superconduct with his presence on the team and her weapons buff. So ladies and gentlemen, I wanted you to deduce it yourselves, but I'll just say it. He clearly has a lot of potential, though to be fair, not just Cyno, but whole stellar superconduct reaction. Anyway, this is a victory for the god of the underworld and the endgame annihilating beast. You can support me by subscribing and becoming a channel member, because guess what? I'll be giving away Welkin Moons to members in every video that comes out. In this case, Naru won, so he has to DM me on Discord so I can buy it for him. You can also support me by purchasing crystal top-ups, Welkin Moons, and battle passes using a secret method, which after running the numbers is still cheaper than buying with a VPN in Japan. You just have to DM me on Discord as well, and I will personally buy it for you in-game entirely legally. That's all for now. See ya!